Welcome everyone to tonight's lecture. Thank you for being with us to explore the links of mental health and medicine throughout the ages. And we're really excited to be able to have this opportunity to talk to you about this, particularly at this time. Before we start, a few housekeeping notes. This will be recorded and will be placed on the Marble Hill YouTube channel, but have no fear, you won't be visible. And you will be on mute and have your videos off for the duration of the talk. But please do ask lots of questions to Dr. Sonia Gandhi this evening. And you can do that by going to the chat function, which looks like the little speech bubble at the bottom, and pose any questions, and I will do my best to answer them at the very end of her talk this evening. As many of you will know, Marble Hill is being revived, which is hugely exciting for us and for our community. It will see the house being open for 5 days a week for free, our sports facilities being invested in, as well as our parks from bins to benches. We're also, of course, improving our landscape. And tonight, that's why Dr. Sonia Gandhi is going to talk to us a little bit more about that landscape and how that importance that holds for us and for our community. Dr. Sonia Gandhi is a GP by trade, but she is unbelievably committed to improving the holistic health of her patients and indeed the whole community. She volunteers her time tirelessly to create the Walk with a Doc, which is fantastic walks to support people's mental health across Marble Hill and also Orleans, and just allows people through outside therapy to commune with others, to be active and find togetherness in the beauty of nature. From her lead, we've set up a community walking group at Marble Hill, which meets every Tuesday at 11 o'clock. We are very grateful this evening to be able to welcome her, to share her love of history, but also to share the generosity of time and spirit that she always gives to enhance the health of all, and particularly our community. So without further ado, may I introduce you to Dr. Sonia Gandhi. Thank you, Sonia.
Thank you. Good evening, and a huge thank you to Rachel, and what a wonderful, lovely introduction. Thank you so much, Rachel. And thank you, Marble Hill Park and English Heritage, for inviting me to speak to you today about mental health and medicine through the ages. So a little bit about myself. My name is Dr. Sonia Gandhi. I'm an NHS GP in a practice in Richmond, southwest London. I have a special interest in dermatology, and I am also a certified lifestyle medicine physician. In my role as an educator, I provide talks and lectures and workshops in lifestyle medicine. And in my spare time, as Rachel alluded to, I host voluntary walks as part of the Walk with a Doc initiative. I can be contacted by email at info@drsoniagandhi.com, or you can follow me on social media at my Instagram and Facebook handles are there. However, I'm afraid I'm unable to provide any personal medical advice, as this would be best done by your GP that you're registered with, or any hospital specialists. So what is health? Well, health is a state of complete physical, mental, and social well-being, and not merely the absence of disease or infirmity. The World Health Organization then go on to say that an important implication of this definition is that mental health is more than just the absence of mental disorders or disabilities. So let's delve a little bit deeper into the World Health Organization's definition. Well, they say that mental health is a state of well-being in which the individual realizes his or her own abilities, can cope with the normal stresses of life, can work productively, and is able to make a contribution to his or her community. They go on to say that mental health is fundamental to our collective and individual ability as humans to think, emote, interact with each other, earn a living, and enjoy life. The promotion, protection, and restoration of mental health can be regarded as a vital concern of individuals, communities, and societies throughout the world. Now, mental illness is not by any means a modern day phenomenon. It's actually been prevalent throughout the history of mankind, as you can see through this timeline. In the ancient Mesopotamians, 2000 years BC, thought that mental illness originated from possession by demons. In 1600 BC, the ancient Egyptians thought that mental disease was due to supernatural forces. And you can see as we progress through the timeline, the ancient Indians in 1400 BC thought mental illness was due to devils. We then go back to the same theme about demons when the ancient Persians believed that that's where the origins lay in 770 BC. And it wasn't really until the time of Hippocrates, about 470 BC, when we started to think differently, and they believed that perhaps mental illness had a root in some imbalance in our bodily fluids. But then the ancient Chinese, they go back to the original assumption that mental illness held a root in possession by demons. We then move along to 1400 AD, where we started to think that, well, mental illness is not necessarily linked to devils or demons or other supernatural forces, but we still didn't really understand it very well, and the mentally ill were treated in the most barbaric way, as you will find out through this talk. We progressed through to the 19th century and the 20th century, and that's when things started to change. Freud and various other psychologists, they started to then delve into mental illness, and they started to believe that there's something else going on here. Freud believed that there might be a conflict between id, ego, and superego. We then sort of evolved through the timelines to today, and we now understand that mental illness is much more complex, and we understand that therapies such as cognitive behavioral therapy or medication can often help. We also now understand that there might be a genetic aspect to it, but we've also realized that the brain is not hardwired. Whereas once upon a time we thought that there was no possibility of changing in the brain makeup, we've actually discovered that the brain has something called neuroplasticity. And that means it's like plastic, so it can continuously be molded. And we've also now, as a result, realized that lifestyle interventions, such as exercise, nutrition, meditation, these can actually all help to rewire the brain and help to reframe thoughts. And as we move into the future, who knows what role technology will play in our mental well-being. Now, some of you may recognize this portrait. It's that of Henrietta Howard, the Countess of Suffolk. She was born in 1689, and she was thought to be around 77 or 78 years old when she died in 1767. And now, despite being born into a respected and aristocratic family, the first half of her life was actually very troubled. Her parents both passed away tragically when she was a young teenager. And then her marriage to her first husband, Charles Howard, the youngest son of the 5th Earl of Suffolk, was a tempestuous one in which she was the victim of domestic abuse. Charles was often described in the history books as being ill-tempered, obstinate, drunken, extravagant, brutal, and also infamously he was a gambler as well. Now, it was during this marriage that she was appointed the role of a woman of the bedchamber to Caroline, the Princess of Wales. And then shortly afterwards, she actually became the mistress of the Prince of Wales, who eventually did accede the throne to become King George II. And in 1723, the Prince of Wales bestowed a financial settlement to Henrietta Howard, and she used this settlement to build what we now know as Marble Hill House. So construction of Marble Hill House commenced in 1724, and it took 5 years to complete. In 1733, her husband Charles passed away, and then this gave her the opportunity to remarry in 1735. And then this second marriage to George Berkeley was a very happy and loving one. But oops, sorry, I just jumped ahead. But tragically, unfortunately, in the later years of her life, Henrietta suffered with ill health. She suffered from gout, hearing impairments, headaches. Now, these days, when we suffer a headache, you know, our first port of call is often just to take a paracetamol. But, you know, you'll be astounded to hear the treatments that Henrietta received for headaches. At that time, the treatment consisted of her jaw being drilled. And so thankfully, this barbaric treatment for headaches is no longer part of our medical treatment toolbox these days. But then also, with the demise of her only child, Henry, in 1745, and then the love of her life, her second husband, George Berkeley, in 1746, when he died, she was struck with inconsolable grief. And her mental well-being also took a toll as a result. Now I'm going to go back a little bit in history, because this is quite important and fits into the story of Henrietta. This is a picture of Bethlem Royal Hospital in London, also known as Bedlam. It was founded in 1247, initially as a refuge for the homeless, but in 1330, it was then known as a hospital, and by 1377, it was a hospital exclusively for the mentally ill, and it's actually the oldest mental hospital in Europe. By 1600, the state had taken control of Bethlem. Now, it didn't take much to be admitted to this hospital, also known as Bedlam. You know, just being melancholic, feeling down, having the blues, being willful, you know, just having an opinion, being determined or strong-willed was enough to actually get you admitted to this, to Bedlam. And, you know, for men who felt that their wives were being disobedient, they could easily bribe a psychiatrist to have their wives admitted. And once you're admitted, there were no legal channels to appeal. So this was around the time of Henrietta Howard. Now, it wasn't until the advent of the 1774 Lunacy Act that things started to change. And now there would be a requirement to have medical certification by 2 separate doctors to sign off admission. And in addition, the asylums and all its patients now had to be centrally registered, and the asylums would actually have to be annually inspected. But nevertheless, this didn't actually result in the prevention of admission, and patients were, as I said, seldom, if ever, discharged when they were admitted. Now, you know, our tourist attractions these days consist of perhaps, you know, a tour into central London, looking at the sights, but you'd be quite astounded to know that Bedlam and other asylums were thought to be tourist attractions in their time. They were opened up to tours to wealthy Londoners who would come along to watch the patients who were caged and shackled, which is quite a difficult concept to sort of think of in this day and age. This picture here is of an American seaman called William Norris. He was confined upright in a harness and chained to his bed for 10 years. And in 1814, the philanthropist Edward Wakefield was on one of these tours looking at the hospital. And he was really shocked to see William Norris confined in this horrific position. So then he took it upon himself, along with two other of his friends, William Hone and James Bevans, and they campaigned to change conditions for patients in these asylums. And William Norris was eventually removed from the shackles. However, sadly, he died a few months later. Now, that was just one type of horrific treatment that was used at the time, but other treatments included rotational therapy, where the patients would be placed in a chair and suspended from the ceiling. And then this chair was spun up to 100 rotations per minute. So you can imagine, I mean, the patients, were vomiting and experiencing the most horrendous vertigo as a result of this. But this vomiting and vertigo was actually perceived to be healthy and thought to allow for healing from mental illness. Other horrific treatments that were used were bloodletting by leeches, the inducing of blisters on patients, and something called cupping glass therapy. And it's no surprise to know that their mass graves have been discovered for those patients who sadly died at Bedlam. Now, this is a picture of some artifacts that are part of the Science Museum group collection, showing the type of harness and the shackles that were used. But our understanding of science, of the science of mental health and the brain, started to change in the 19th century. These three gentlemen, Emil Kraepelin, Sigmund Freud, and Carl Jung, they were all born in the mid to late 19th century. And they were responsible for the classification of mental health disorders and talking therapies such as psychoanalysis. So, however, despite our growing understanding of mental illness, it could be argued that some of the practices that were employed in the treatment of mental illness still were very harrowing and barbaric. They would often use a therapy called deep sleep therapy, where they would use narcotics to knock the patient out. They would then keep the patient in a drug-induced coma for months or weeks by injecting them with daily insulin. And whilst the patient was unconscious, they would often then use electroconvulsive therapy. And as you can imagine, there was a very, very high mortality with this treatment mode. Moving on to the 1930s, we started to delve into surgical procedures. Lobotomies became a mainstay of treatment. They would often drill the prefrontal lobes of the brain. The skull was drilled and alcohol was injected into the brain to destroy the nerves. And again, they believed that this would cure mental illness. And they would still be using electroconvulsive therapy in the 1930s as well. But as you can imagine, there were many broken bones. Patients would suffer memory loss afterwards. Although it's not mainstay of treatment, it still is, however, used for very, very, very severe depression in this day and age as well. If we move on to the 1940s, you can see we then started to have the advent of pharmacological treatments such as lithium. 1950s, we then had tranquilizers such as clomipramine that were available. In the 1960s, tricyclic antidepressants came onto the market. And in the 1980s, the drugs that we are probably all more familiar with now, a group called the SSRIs, selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, came onto the market. And the most sort of common one that people know about is something called fluoxetine. However, there were two that were introduced in the 1970s, but they were withdrawn due to safety effects at that time. So if we fast forward now to the 21st century, you can see that we have come a long way, thankfully, in our management of mental illness. We now have options such as pharmacological, SSRIs, which I've just discussed, or non-pharmacological options. And these consist of talking therapies, counselling, psychotherapy, CBT, or our lifestyle. Lifestyle is a very, very powerful tool in the management of mental illness. And I'm just going to go on to discuss a little bit about this now. So the turn of the new decade in 2020, with the COVID pandemic and the ensuing lockdowns, it's no doubt brought its own challenges with a detrimental impact on all of our mental health, physical health, as well as our general well-being. And an ONS survey conducted in June 2020 revealed that 69% of people were somewhat or very worried about the effect of COVID on their life. And that's staggering, 70% of us felt like that back in June 2020. And 63%, almost 2/3, have had future concerns. 56%, more than half of us, felt very stressed and anxious. And 50% of us, just under 50%, 49%, were frankly just bored. The lockdown restrictions, there was not much you could do. So it was a boring time. And then another survey, the UK Household Longitudinal Survey, which was, they questioned 15,000, just over 15,500 people. 35.86% of those said that they were suffering from loneliness, which is quite a staggering figure, and it is quite worrying that we've had all these mental illness issues due to the pandemic, including loneliness as well. And we know that the pandemic and the lockdowns have also taken their toll on our physical health. We know that poor mental health can exacerbate physical ailments, and it can decrease recovery from illness as well. And as I said, the opposite can also be said, that poor physical health can also impact mental health. Now, whilst we have very little external control over the pandemic, there is so much that we can actually do by ourselves as individuals to sustain and safeguard our mental well-being. And this is where we're going to explore lifestyle. We now have an abundance of medical and scientific evidence that supports lifestyle measures, not only as a preventative measure, but also as a solo treatment option, and also as an adjunct to pharmacological or talking therapies. So I'm just going to talk you through this little wheel. At the top here, we've got something called Shinrin Yoku. Now, the practice of Shinrin Yoku, it's the Japanese art of forest bathing. It's been shown to decrease stress, improve physical health through the exposure of aromatic volatile substances, which are known as phytoncides, and these are emitted by plants and trees. And Shinrin Yoku is actually one of the mainstay forms of treatment for mental illness in Japan, and it's often prescribed as a first-line treatment modality for depression. We also know that exercise and physical activity is not only fundamental to the optimal function of our bodies from a physical perspective, but it's vital for our mental health as well, and our immune system as well, and the social benefits as well. It's during exercise that powerful hormones such as oxytocin, dopamine and endorphins. These are the body's natural painkillers, endorphins, and also neurotransmitters such as serotonin. These are all released during exercise, and these are natural antidepressants. So it's powerful what your exercise can do to our mental well-being. We know that practices such as yoga, meditation and mindfulness, they can also improve mental well-being and decrease anxiety and depression by bringing us back into the moment. You know, the world we now live in can be extremely overwhelming and frenetic. And by utilizing these ancient practices such as yoga and meditation, it actually allows us to be present and focus on our breathing. Yes, I'm sure at some point in our lives, you know, all of us have felt nervous. You know, for instance, giving a lecture on Zoom, and you know, you can feel your heart racing, your breathing becomes faster, your pupils dilate, and this is all because a hormone called adrenaline is being pumped around the body. Well, this is due to the activation of the sympathetic part of the autonomic nervous system. And this is known as the fight or flight mode. And historically, you know, back in caveman day, if we encountered danger such as being attacked by a lion, then our bodies would activate this sympathetic nervous system, and it would enable us to either fight the danger, the lion, or if you were brave enough to fight it, or flee it, flee that danger, run away from that lion as quickly as possible. And then once you are safe from the danger, the fight or flight mode would just automatically switch off, and it would put you back into a calm and relaxed state. But the problem we now encounter in our modern day lifestyle, is that we're constantly feeling stressed or nervous. We're constant information overload. We're bombarded by tasks from every angle, and we don't have a chance to rest and restore our bodies and our minds. So we don't actually switch off from that fight or flight mode. And it's this excess circulating adrenaline and also in combination with other hormones such as cortisol, which tip our bodies towards chronic inflammation, which then ultimately presents itself as chronic disease, including mental illness. But if we were to activate the parasympathetic nervous system, which is the opposite switch to the sympathetic nervous system, we would then activate a state of rest and restoration. And we can then, by doing that, we can actually counteract the negative impact of the prolonged state of anxiety or stress. And so how do we do that? Well, by taking long, slow, deep breaths, you can actually switch on, stimulate that parasympathetic nervous system. And once you do that, your heart rate slows down, your blood pressure becomes lower, the body becomes more relaxed, and then it promotes the release of hormones such as serotonin, the happy hormone, and oxytocin, and it's these that can then alleviate our anxiety states. So how do you do slow deep breathing? Well, I'm not sure if anybody's heard of it, but there's a couple of methods. One is something called box breathing, where you inhale for 4 seconds, you hold your breath for 4 seconds, you exhale for 4 seconds, and then you hold your breath again for 4 seconds. Another popular method is something called 4-5-6 breathing, where you inhale for 4 seconds, you hold for 5 seconds, and then you exhale for 6 seconds. But to be honest, it can actually be any combination. It doesn't have to be 4, 5, 6. It could be 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. It's just whatever is comfortable for you. But the main point to note is that the exhalation should be longer than the inhalation. And eventually, when you get better and better at it if you can double the time that you're exhaling. So if you go from say 4 or 5 to 8 when you're exhaling, you'll get then that's what you're sort of aiming towards. But whatever is comfortable with you, as long as the exhalation is longer, you will then stimulate, you'll switch on something called the vagus nerve. And this is a direct link. It's the main component of the parasympathetic nervous system, which will then lower our blood pressure, lower our pulse rate, and put us into a state of rest and relaxation. And meditation often uses deep breathing to do this. Again, there's been lots of evidence to show that keeping a gratitude diary or a gratitude journal, just jotting 3 things down, 3 things, 4 things, 5 things, whatever you have time for, and you feel comfortable with, just 3 things down that you're grateful for on a daily basis. And you can do this first thing in the morning or before you go to bed. But it's been actually shown scientifically to reframe negative thoughts. So again, it can really help with improving our mental well-being. And it doesn't have to be anything, you don't have to do a sort of a thesis or an essay, just 3 simple things, just something like, the sun was shining today, or I saw a beautiful flower in Marble Hill Park. Just anything simple, just anything that you're grateful for can help to reframe negative thoughts. Decrease screen time. Now this is an interesting one, because during the lockdown, we've actually become more tech savvy, and digitalization has been our conduit to keep in touch with one another, with friends and family in our community, because we were not allowed to meet up in person due to the pandemic. But I'm not sure if anybody's watched a very interesting Netflix documentary called Social Dilemma, but they also explore this. But there have been other studies that show that too much screen time can actually be associated with a negative impact on our mental well-being. There has been shown to be increased depression with high social media use, and there's also been evidence to show there's increased loneliness, anxiety, and depression, as I've also already mentioned, but also physically as well. There's something called the eye neck, which is due to poor posture because of our constant use of digital devices. So it's just something to be aware of. Yes, it's very helpful, and it's very useful, a very useful tool, but we have to just balance that and make sure we're not letting it take over and affect our mental well-being. Healthy eating is really fundamental to our mental and physical and immune well-being as well. Healthy eating focused around plant-based foods has been shown to decrease anxiety and depression, and it improves mood. And really it's down to the key of having a diverse range of plant foods, because what they do is the fiber, which you can only get from plant-based foods, that improves the gut microbiome. And the gut microbiome has been shown, again, to improve mental well-being through the gut-brain axis. And also, we know just by minimizing highly processed foods that are high in trans fatty acids and unrefined sugars, what they do is, again, they damage the gut microbiome, which will then lead to mental illness and anxiety. We move on to relationships. Having positive relationships is often underestimated, but there have been several studies that have shown that loneliness can increase mortality by 26%. And poor social connections and living alone can be as detrimental to health and well-being as smoking 15 cigarettes per day. And we know the devastating effects of loneliness and mental health. It increases depression, it affects our cognition, and the pandemic and all these lockdowns have really had a major impact on our mental well-being in this respect. Now, there are 5 areas in the world known as the blue zones. These are in Sardinia, Italy, Okinawa, Japan, Loma Linda, California, the Nicoya Peninsula in Costa Rica, and Icaria in Greece. Now, these 5 zones are known as blue zones, and they are called this because they have been associated with longevity. They have the highest number of centenarians living there, who not only do they have long lives, but they actually have healthy lives. They have very little chronic illness, and they enjoy good health into an old age. And one of the main characteristics of this is their emphasis on positive relationships with family and their community. And research has also shown that volunteering, helping others, particularly if helping others it has a meaningful purpose and you're doing it for the right reasons, that can help alleviate any stress that you are suffering from yourself, and it can help again to reduce morbidity and mortality. Another fundamental pillar of good health, which is often undervalued, is sleep. We spend a good 1/3 of our lifetime on sleep, and we'll all know, but when we've had a good night's sleep, we feel better the next day. We will be in a better mood, we're more productive at work, we get on better with our friends and family, we make healthier food choices, and we exercise better as well. And then you will sleep better again the next night. So it's like a domino effect. But during sleep, we think that we're not doing anything, but actually during sleep, the body is busy. It's busy optimizing its immune system. It's optimizing its hormonal balance. It's secreting growth hormone, which occurs mainly at night. And secretion of growth hormone is important at nighttime because it repairs the gut lining. Also during sleep, we are then using that time to eliminate toxins, metabolites that build up in our brain through something called the glymphatic system. And optimal sleep has been associated, as I said, with an improved mood, improved IQ, our memories are better, we have better concentration. It's also been shown to decrease heart disease, diabetes, depression, and obesity. So really, having an impaired nights of sleep can have detrimental effects on our physical, mental well-being, and also on our immune system as well. And last but not least, the sun. And isn't it wonderful now that the sun is out shining? We're in spring, summer's around the corner, and you will notice that automatically our moods feel better when the seasons change and the sun is out, because the sun plays a vital role in our health and well-being. Not only does exposure to natural sunlight activate vitamin D synthesis in our skin, which is an essential pro-hormone, and it's required for optimal bone health, for our immunity, and vitamin D is also involved in the regulation of more than 200 genes. But aside from those amazing benefits, sunlight plays a crucial role on our mental well-being. Exposure to sunlight increases that happy hormone, serotonin again, which then in turn improves our mood, and it suppresses the production of a hormone called melatonin, which is the sleep hormone. And we want melatonin to be suppressed in the daytime so that it functions properly, and circadian rhythms functioning properly, so that we then secrete melatonin in the evening, which is when we want to be sleeping. So sunlight plays a critical role in that circadian rhythm balance. So that was just a sort of quick whistle tour around that cycle of lifestyle measures that we can all individually utilize to improve our mood, our mental well-being, as well as our physical well-being. Now, there's no doubt that this has been a challenging year, and I suspect, you know, it's still going to be there'll still be some challenging months ahead for us as individuals, communities, and globally as the human race. As we can see, the pandemic is now having a devastating effect in other parts of the world right now. But this pandemic has also provided us the opportunity to bring mental illness and mental well-being to the fore. And there are a wealth of charities and organizations out there to help. So if you do find yourself struggling with your mental well-being and you're unsure of who to turn to, there's a wealth of resources such as the Wild Mind Project, English Heritage, particularly with all their amazing parks that you can access. You know, just as I said, we've discussed being out in nature has such a profound beneficial effect on our mental well-being. So please, if you have access, do go and visit one of their parks. The Heads Together campaign, which is an umbrella foundation set up by the Royal Foundation, the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge and the Duke of Sussex. It's a fantastic organisation where they have brought together various mental health charities such as Every Mind Matters, Place to Be, and Mind. And then I also run on a monthly basis something called Walk with the Doc. It's an initiative that was set up by a cardiologist in America, and it's an opportunity where you come along for a walk with the doctor, who will just give you a quick 5 to 10 minute talk on any health topic, and then we just go off for a leisurely walk for up to an hour in the parks, just chatting about anything and everything. And the ones I managed to do before lockdown were wonderful. It's such a lifeline for people. You get to meet other people, make new friendships. You're out in nature, your physical health's improving, your mental health's improving. So there are some amazing resources out there. But also please do remember that sometimes if these things aren't enough to help you, your GP is always there to help and support you. So I hope that you have enjoyed this talk tonight on mental health and medicine throughout the ages. And remember, as the author of this wonderful book called The Boy, the Mole, the Fox and the Horse, Charles Macquarie, the author, says that when the big things feel out of control, focus on what you love right under your nose. Thank you very much for your time and your attention.
Thank you, Dr. Sonia. Those are so many wise words and such great ways in which we can all work to help ourselves, but also help those around in our community who might need a bit more support at this time. Please do ask questions, and you can do that through going to the chat function at the bottom, which does look like that speech bubble. I will do my best to ask Dr. Sonia some questions about her fantastic talk. I have to say, I think it's definitely on my gratitude list is being born at this time of in the history of medicine, given some of the challenges that were set for those people who were perceived to be slightly mad or who didn't agree with their husband. So which was just unbelievable. So I've got a question about phytoncides, and
Yeah.
you were talking about from Shinrin Yoku, and it was just a question about how do we get these? How are they absorbed by our body?
Well, they're aromatic chemicals that are emitted by these plants and trees, and we just absorb them. You know, they're emitted by the trees and plants, and I think we just absorb them through our skin, through breathing through the around that area. But you can only get it when you're immersed in nature. You know, so going for a walk around around the street or a block of flats, you know, that's not going to give you the same impact. It really is the connection with nature here that is really vital and important. But also, you know, from you know, we're all part of this natural world. So it's very difficult to, you know, when we try to disconnect from it, our mental well-being, our physical mental well-being suffers. So you can see it, you know, just when you feel so much better when you're out in nature, when you're in a park, and instead forest bathing, it's such an important and simple treatment modality. And I said in Japan, they use it frequently. And it's actually also been shown to help the immune system as well. So not only does it benefit our mental and physical well-being, but also it has a positive impact on our immune system as well. So it's just being amongst it, amongst nature, those chemicals are then absorbed into us.
Someone asked about whether, as a GP, whether there is a move to offer this kind of treatment in the future. You know, if we're going to follow Japan in this route, what do you think?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think this is such an amazing resource we have. You know, we're blessed in this part of London, living around here with all these wonderful parks. Absolutely, it should be. And there are some practices where they utilize something called social prescribing, but it's very variable. It just depends on which area you live in, whether they have funding for it or not. And you know, that's partly one of the reasons I've sort of taken on this initiative of Walk with a Doc, because you know, I was also finding that I didn't know where I could send my patients, and sometimes it can be quite intimidating. You know, it's very easy in sort of the doctor's consultation room just to say, well, look, you know, you need to go off and exercise, or you need to go for a walk. But when you're feeling really deflated or anxious or stressed, having somebody being prescriptive like that isn't always conducive or helpful. Whereas I think if you can demonstrate, you know, or if you have a safe zone like going for a walk in a park where there's no judgments, there's no questions, it doesn't matter about your ability, anybody can come along. It really doesn't matter what age you are, how fit and healthy you are. It really doesn't matter, because we're just going for a lovely leisurely walk. And I really do hope, my vision would be to be able to grow this and try and get other GP surgeries and GPs in the area to come into this idea, and maybe we could set up a network where we could, you know, we're offering this on a more frequent basis. That would be wonderful. But you know, if you feel inspired, please, you know, contact me, come along to my walk with the doc. But equally, you know, why not pose it to your GP surgery? You know, these days, lots of GP practices have patient participation groups. Why not bring it up? You know, say, look, you know, we would love to collaborate, or can we set up a community group where we can go for a walk together? It's beneficial for doctors, it's beneficial for patients. You know, everybody benefits all round. So yeah, I think it should happen. I want it to happen, and I really hope that we know this vision does come to fruition.
Well, we've certainly been inspired with our walking group, and thank you for your help in getting that sorted. And it's run by our volunteers each week. But we love having you doing your walk with a doc with us each month. And
Thank you.
please do go and see. There's posters and there's information about it on the website and on our social media. So please do come and get involved and meet Dr. Sonia in person. She's got legs. This is the joy of Zoom, and I know that we're taking up much more of your time in terms of doing all the virtual things and screen time, but we are very grateful. I've got one last question from the team, and it's more about you, to say, what made you start volunteering your time to help people with the Walk with the Doc initiative?
Well, I've always had a fascination with lifestyle medicine, and I remember when I was doing my GP training. Actually, I think I was really inspired by my GP trainer at the time. When you're becoming a GP, you spend a year after doing your hospital stint working as a junior doctor. You spend a year under, like as an apprentice, so you have in general practice, and you have a GP trainer who mentors you for 1 year before you're fully qualified GP. And I had this amazing GP trainer who always kind of taught me to think out of the box. I recall on one house visit, we went to see a patient who he had the flu, and he was really quite unwell with a fever, etc. But the first thing we did, well, we went to see the patient and we were shown to his bedroom. My GP trainer, the first thing he did was he opened the curtains in that patient's bedroom, because well, you're never going to get better if you're in a dark, confined room. Let the sunlight in. And at that time, I didn't think anything of it, but it's just through experience and through practicing, I've actually come to see that, our lifestyles are so powerful in the impact they have on our well-being. And it's not often something that's taught very well in medical schools. So I have been on a journey to learn about it myself. I've now certified as a lifestyle medicine physician, and it's evidence-based. The beauty of this is it's not sort of hocus pocus. There is an abundance of medical and scientific evidence behind it to back it up, and it's simple to do, and it's very low risk. There's no side effects, and if you can help somebody to help themselves by just identifying aspects of their lifestyle, I feel that I've done a much better service than just giving them endless prescriptions. Now, I'm not saying that there's no role for that. There absolutely is, and there will be times where I do need to prescribe medication, and that's absolutely fine. But if you don't address the root cause, you're never ever going to get that person better, even with the medications. It's just a sticking plaster. Somebody's not sleeping properly, their physical and mental health will always suffer. Their blood pressure will always be high. They're at risk of diabetes, of depression. So unless and it's something simple, just to say, well, look, tell me, how many hours are you sleeping for? What are you up all night on a digital device? Are you looking at social media till you go to bed? Because the blue light, we know that the blue light that's emitted from digital devices, laptops, computers, TVs, phones, it alters our sleep mechanism. It blocks the melatonin hormone that we require to sleep. But if you're not made aware of the connection, it's very difficult for you to take those measures yourself. So I think that's really where my sort of interest has developed from, that I want to be able to show people that there are some things that they can do themselves, which they can. It's about empowering you so that you feel that you're in control of your health, rather than being somebody else controlling your health. But of course, there's absolutely a role for medication and surgery, and that can be life-saving. So that's not to be talk down. It's very important, but we have up to now really underestimated the value of simple lifestyle measures and the benefit they can have in our lives.
Well, thank you, Dr. Sonia Gandhi. We are so grateful for your expertise and wisdom, and definitely on my gratitude list is this evening's event. So thank you so much, and on behalf of all of us here listening, we're very grateful. Please do come and have a walk in Marble Hill. Do look up Walk with the Doc, but most of all, do have a really good night's sleep. And thank you so much, everybody, for being here. But particular thank you to Dr. Sonia Gandhi.
Thank you. Thank you, Rachel. Thank you for having me. Thanks very much.
Take care. Good
Thank
night
you.
all.
Bye-bye. Bye.